So for this series of videos, we're going to take a character that we have fully animated in Maya, and we're going to export out those animations and that character and take that into Unreal so we can create a fully playable character with those animations in the game. So first thing to do that, we have a couple of types of files that need to come out of Maya so we can take those into Unreal. I'm going to go ahead and open up my character's rig. So this is the rig with no animation on it at all. So this male bulky rig is the one that I used in order to create all of this animation. And once I have this open, it's just a character rig like any other rig. We can move it around. There's some stuff messed up on there. Don't worry about that. That's where I have 1 foot in FK and IK. So just like any other rig, this is the rig we used to create that animation. The first thing we need inside of Unreal is this character mesh and the joints that are deforming this mesh. So there are two different types of models that Unreal understands. There's a skeletal mesh and a static mesh. And a static mesh is a mesh that doesn't really change throughout the game, right? Things like crates or a table or a chair or something, those aren't really going to deform or change drastically. But a character is going to deform, right? And so for that, Unreal needs to know the mesh, what is the model, and what is the joints that are deforming that mesh. It doesn't need all of this extra rigs, all the control pieces. It just needs the mesh and the skeleton. So first I'm going to select all of the parts of the model. So that's all of these pieces here. I'm actually going to deselect 2 pieces because they're actually just there for highlights. It's this HR trans and HL trans. So I'm going to hold control and deselect those. Those are actually just there to make the eyes look more reflective and glossy, and that would require some extra material work once we get into the engine, and I don't really want to deal with that for this tutorial. So that's all of the model that we need to export. The next thing we need is the skeleton that is deforming that model. So I'm going to hit this plus sign under TSMG rig, and it's going to open up, and we're going to see there's 2 more chains of objects here. I'm going to select TSMG Cruft. I'm going to hit the plus sign on that. And under there you'll see a lot of files, but the very top one is TSMG World Joint. Okay, so that's the top most joint for the entire character rig. If I hit plus, you'll see that that's all the joints that deform our character, right? So I just need to select that top joint. I'm going to hold control, select it, and so now what I have selected is all of the mesh that I want to export and the top joint. So let's go ahead and export this. I'm going to go to File, and then I'm going to go to Export Selection and choose my options box. Now currently mine is already set to FBX export. That's what we're going to use. Occasionally you will open up Maya and the FBX export will not be in this list. Now there's a bunch of different types of files we could export. OBJ, another type of Maya file. So there's a lot of different things, right? But if that doesn't show up, if FBX export doesn't show up, we're going to go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager. And it's close to the bottom. It's this fbxmaya.mll is the file that we would need to check on. Okay, so once we have that, we're going to go ahead and hit Export Selection. This is really just to allow us to pick the type of export. And then it's going to take us into this folder, which is where we are going to export out our model. So first I'm going to create me a folder in here. You see I already have a whole bunch of other export folders where I've been doing this in the past. This is in our scenes folder for our project, so we want to have our scene set. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, and we'll call this Game Exports. And this is where we're going to export out our FBX files. Now, by default, when you first open this is probably going to be set to a different preset. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that'll look like. It's probably going to be set to Autodesk Media and Entertainment. Okay? And so this will allow us to reset everything so I can show you what we need to change. Because this is going to be close, but there's a couple of things that are different. If I click this Geometry tab, I want to also check smoothing groups at the very top. So we already have smooth mesh and referenced asset. That's fine. Under animation, we want to make sure animation is set or checked. Later we'll be checking baked animation, but not right now. And we want to make sure skins and blend shapes are checked. If I scroll down a little lower, we have this advanced options. And so if I open that up, there are two things we need to talk about in here: units and axis conversion. So under units, this is saying what is one Maya unit, like what does that represent, and also what does that represent in Unreal after we export it. So currently, I'm just going to leave that set to automatic, but this is something that you need to be aware of. If you've modeled something in Unreal, you're going to kick this out to, you modeled something in Maya, you're going to kick this out to Unreal. You need to know how big that is going to be, and so that's something you have to plan ahead for. Axis conversion is just saying which axis does the current program think is up. Okay, so right now Maya thinks Y is up. You'll see that in our little axes down here, Y is pointing up. But Unreal disagrees. Unreal thinks that Z is up. Actually, Autodesk 3D Studio Max does as well. So let's go ahead and change that to Z because what we're setting this to is Unreal. Once we have that, I'm also going to go ahead and type in a file name here. I'm just going to call this mail. I'm going to say export selection. Okay, we get a couple of errors here, but there are a couple of warnings here, but this isn't that big of a deal. This is basically just saying parts of the rig didn't export, like constraints and IK, and we already knew that, so that's not that big of a deal. Actually, it's not a big deal at all. That's the only way we can export it. We'll get those errors. So, okay, so now we have the model file. Let's go ahead and export out at least one animation so we can test this out in the engine. So, File, Open Scene. I'm going to go ahead and export out my run animation. Now, before I do anything, I want to first recognize how long this run animation is. So if I select one of my controls, frame 1 through 20 is a full run cycle. So that's the frame range I'm going to need to export out. I also do not need to export out any mesh for this. I'm just exporting out the skeleton because we're going to import in the mesh with the other file. So I don't need to grab all of these model pieces. I just need to go under that TSMG Cruft and select the TSMG world joint. Now if I go File, I'm going to do Export Selection again. Game Exports. All of this we can leave the same. The only thing we need to change is Bake Animation. And I'm going to change that from 1 to 100 to 1 to 20. So it's going to export out that first 20 frames. Now when I say Bake Animation, what is actually going to happen is, since we're deleting all of those rigged parts, this is going to set a keyframe on every one of our joints to make sure they stay in the right location once we've exported those out. So once we've changed that, again, all of these settings should still be the same. I'm going to call this mail underscore run. Hit export selection, and it's going to kick out that animation. Again, don't worry about this error. It's not even an error. This is actually just a notification. So go ahead and close this. Okay, so let's start testing this out in Unreal. We have some more animations to export out, but this will be a way to test to see if this worked before we go through all the effort of exporting out all those other animations. So I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to click here, and we're just going to type Epic, because this is how we are going to launch Unreal, is with this Epic Games Launcher. Now it's going to take it a second to open up, but once it does, we have a bunch of different engines we can choose from. You just need to remember which one you're using. So in this case, 4.14.3 is the newest version I have. If I open this up on a newer version, like 4.15, then I wouldn't probably be able to open it up on 4.143 anymore. So just remember that in case you have to work on this on multiple computers, so you download the same version of the engine. So I'm going to go ahead and click that to launch, and it's going to take it a few minutes, and there we go. So now that we have this is an old project I've been working on. We're going to create a new project. So if we click New Project, you'll see that there's a bunch of templates we can start with. We could start with a vehicle project, or we could start with a first-person project. But we're actually going to start with a third-person project. That's going to give us a playable character. It's not our character, but is a playable character. And it's going to give us a lot of the blueprint, which is sort of the control data that we need to use for our character. I'm also going to go ahead and just put this somewhere on my desktop. Let's make a new folder. No. Desktop. Make a new folder. We'll call this UE4 tutorial. There we go. I can't spell, but that's close enough. Tortilla. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and we'll just call this my project. There we go. So now we have all that set up. Create project. And it's going to start to build all of the assets we need for that project. So you'll actually see it is creating this My Project under here. And in that My Project folder is all of the pieces that we need, including all of this content that we'll need later. So let's go ahead and open that back up. I didn't mean to minimize it. But so this is what we're going to get by default. This is every time you create a new template for the third-person character, this is what you'll get. So if I hit the play button, you'll see that I have a fully playable character. I can run around, can tap the space bar to jump. I'm using WASD to run, and so I can run this way. The only thing that this doesn't have that we're going to implement later is I want to implement that when I click the mouse button that our character will punch. So let's go ahead and hit escape. Now navigating around Unreal, if you've never been in it, that takes a little bit getting used to. Left click, middle click, right click, and so just sort of take a little bit of time and kind of get used to the navigation, but it'll take a little bit of time to get used to that. Lots of stuff going on in here. Here's a bunch of basic shapes we could put into the scene if we wanted to. We can also grab objects, move them. The shortcut keys W, E, and R still work in Maya just like or in Unreal just like they do in Maya. Now, down here along the bottom is our content browser. And this section is where all of the files that are, or where all of the assets that we're using are located. So this isn't the best way to view it, or at least I don't think. So what I usually do is I click this little button right here, show or hide the sources panel. And so this will allow us to see everything under the content folder. Right. So I want to show you quickly. We have this mannequin, which is this guy here, right? And under that, he has a list of a bunch of different animations, a couple other files that are not animation files, but are animation related. And then under the character file, he has his materials, he has his mesh, so there's the model, there's a physics asset and a skeleton, and then of course the texture files. So those are all the things that kind of go into making a fully functional character, right? That we're going to be able to move around. So some of that is just going to get created for us when we import our character into Maya, and some of it we have to make ourselves. And so that's part of what this video is about, is showing you how to make some of that stuff. So I'm going to go to Content, and currently we have this mannequin character. I'm just going to make one for my character. So I'm going to go right-click and go to New Folder, and I'm going to call this Male Character. So double click on that. So now we're in this male character folder. I'm going to create another folder and call it Anim. And that's just going to be a place for me to put my animations when I import them in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import our male skeletal mesh. So I'm going to right click, import to game, and then I'm going to have to go find that file that I exported, that FBX file. So I'm going to go backslash, this is just where I have it stored on a server. And so I'll go here, and under scenes, you'll see game exports. So I have male run. So I'm just going to go ahead and import in the male for right now. Hit open. And so it's going to bring up this options box. And so since we chose to export the mesh and the skeleton, it recognizes that this is a skeletal mesh. So we're going to check that. We're going to go ahead and import the mesh as well. I'm not going to apply this to a skeleton. So it thinks that maybe I want to export over the current mannequin. I don't. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave that part blank. So it should say none. I'm not going to import any animations right now, so I don't have to check that. Base material name, I'm not going to worry about any of this. It's going to import the material and the textures as they are. We can still do some changes to that, but it'll at least give us something. But under miscellaneous, we want to make sure that we have this convert scene unit checked on. So what that means is for every unit that we exported out of Maya, Unreal is going to recognize that as a unit as well. If we don't check that on, our character will come in about 2.5 feet tall. If I check that on, though, it'll bring him in at the right height. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit import or import all. Either will work. And this is going to take a second, but it's going to bring in our mesh, and it's going to generate a bunch of different files for us that will make our character sort of more functional in Unreal. So by importing in that one file, you'll see I got this male skeletal mesh. It also created this physics asset. This means that any physics operations happening in the game, our character will interact with. And it brought in this male skeleton, or created this male skeleton. So all of those are the things that make the skeletal mesh work. We also have a material here, and the 3 texture files, the color, the normal, and the specular, that go into making that material work. Now if I double click on the male file, you'll see that that's him. I can tumble around, and this is not the best way to look at him. So if I hold down the Alt key, I can sort of tumble around him. And you'll see that it actually works pretty good. If I click on skeleton, you'll see that we have all the joints that make up that skeleton. Go back to mesh. You'll see we have the materials and a bunch of other information about our character. So let's go ahead and just close that. Now, any file that you see or anything in your content browser that you see that has this little star on it, that means it hasn't been saved. If I were to close this and not save it, then the next time I open it up, our character would not be imported into this game. So just to go ahead and be safe, I'm going to go File, Save All. Okay. So now we have our skeletal mesh, but there's no animation for it. So let's import that run animation to see if it will work well. So I'm just going to go to my animations folder. This is where I'm going to save all of these. I'm going to go right click, import to game male character. I'm going to choose male run. Now this is going to work a little differently. We're not importing a skeletal mesh here, we're importing an animation. And Unreal will kind of recognize some of that. So when I hit open, you'll see that this looks a little different. It's not asking if I want to import any mesh, and that's because there's no mesh in that file. I do want this animation to apply to a specific skeleton. I want to apply it to that male skeleton. We just import it in. So this animation will now be an animation for that skeleton. Animation length, if I leave exported time, it usually imports the length of the timeline at where it was when I exported. I actually want to choose animated time, and that will just import that frames 1 through 20 that I had put in when I exported. And again, we want to make sure convert scene units is checked. And I'll go ahead and hit import. And there we go. Now I have this import run file. And if I go back to my male character and open him up, double click on him, we'll see he's still in there, right? But we have a new animation tab along the top. And so if I click animation, now we'll see him running in game. At any point we want to, we can pause. We can scrub back and forth through this run and see it a frame or two at a time. And you'll see that we have our list of animations over here on this side. So go ahead and close that. I'm going to go ahead and do File, Save All. Since that worked, I'm just going to go ahead and export my other animations out of Maya. So let's go through this kind of quickly. I'll do the easy ones first. I have a punch animation. It is 18 frames long, I think. Yep, 18. So I'm going to select that TSMG cruft, the world joint underneath that. File, export selection, game exports. I'm going to call this male punch. And I'm going to do 1 through 18. Export selection. Okay. And I also have an idle. So let's go ahead and open up my idle. It's 150 frames long. So again, choosing that root joint, file, export selection, male idle, and I want to make sure under animations that's 1 to 150. Export selection. Now I saved the more complicated one for last because my jump animation, at least the way I did it, is one long piece. It's my character starting off in this anticipation pose right here, right? And then over the first 5 frames, the character gets up into the air. Now from, say from 5 to 35 is the animation cycling, right? So frame 5 and 35 is sort of this looping cycle up in the air, and this will allow the character to fall infinitely and just keep playing this animation, right? And then from 35 to 42 is the landing, right? Sometimes I'll just write that down on a little notepad before I export so I can always refer back to it. So again, I'm going to choose world joint, and I'm just going to export that out as 3 different animation or 3 different FBX files from this single Maya file. So file, export selection, and so I'll call this male jump underscore up, and that is 1 through 5. I'm going to do it again, file, export selection, male jump, call this loop, and we're going to change the frame range. That was 5 through 35. And finally the down, export selection, jump in, and that was 35 through 42. Okay, I'm going to hit export selection. So now all of our animations have been exported. Now I did that because I also wanted to show you that we can import those in as a batch. So I'm going to go ahead and go to animations. I'm going to right click, import, and I'm going to choose all of those animations that I didn't import in earlier. So idle, hold shift, punch. So those 5 animations, I'm going to go ahead and hit open. And so all of the options that I change here will apply to all of those animations. So again, convert scene needs to be turned on, animated time, and I need to set this to the male skeleton. And when I hit import all, it will import all of my animations and apply them to my male character. So if I go back to my male character, you'll see under animations, now I have a list of animations. I can double click on this. There's our idle. There's our jump down, so that's sort of the landing. Our jump loop, so you can see the character sort of, floating in air. Jump, that's the punch, and the jump up. And so that's all the animations we're going to need for this specific project. So let's go ahead and close that. And just to save everything, we go File, Save All, and that's actually where I'm going to stop for this video. So in the next video, we're going to, because you'll see that if I hit play now, still this character, right? We got to find a way of making this be our character that we're seeing running around and triggering these animations. So we have to do that to sort of replace this character with our character. And we also have to wire up an extra command, so when we click our mouse button, it will punch or play the punch animation. Now, we're going to do one bonus animation as well, in which one bonus video as well, and hopefully what we will get out of that is some sort of physics reaction to where when our character punches certain objects, they actually react to that punch. So come back for the rest of the videos, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.